This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by the Wright Center for Women's Health, providing personalized luxury health care.
Hello and welcome to Dana Being Dana. That's me, and I'm thrilled you're with us. My show is about all different aspects of the human connection, things that bring us together, and living life intentionally. Women supporting women is an important part of Dana Being Dana because I believe that we do not do it enough. With me today are two women who have made careers out of supporting and uplifting others, women in particular. Michelle Jenks, founder of the Fusion Project, and Angela Rose, founder and executive director of P.A.V.E, promoting awareness, victim empowerment. How are you, ladies?
Great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
P.A.V.E is responsible for our t-shirts.
That's right.
And you'll tell us about that shortly. But first, I want to start with you, Michelle. Can you talk about the Fusion Project and why you started it?
I started it 5 years ago. And the backstory is I had years of working with women in rape crisis centers and my own personal experience. And when I heard someone talk for the very first time about sex trafficking, I was appalled and felt like I needed to do something. And I always thought it would be on the recovery end with women and children, but it ended up that I really felt called in the middle of the night one night to help the girls that are in the midst, and boys that are in the midst of being trafficked, and that age is 12 to 14. So it made sense to do something with junior high girls to empower them. And as I did research, I realized that the things that make them vulnerable to that kind of behavior makes them vulnerable to lots of other things, being bullied, being in unhealthy relationships, anxiety. So we kind of put it all together to put a program together for the girls so that they would be empowered and they could find their voice and make wise choices instead of feeling like they were being a victim.
What type of female is most at risk for sex trafficking?
If you're a female, that's really every girl. And that's the hard thing about this is that you never want to blame a girl, hence the shirt. There's never a reason why a female or a male should ever get blamed for that. There's certain behaviors that I think predators look for, especially with girls that give them the idea that they're more susceptible. And so we can work on that with the girls to give them some ideas of behaviors and things like that. But really, if you're a human being, you're a potential victim.
So it's not always a specific type or
it's not
a person or anything like that.
I will say that we work with an organization that does the recovery for women and girls that have been trafficked, and specifically girls for what we do. And they say that 100% of the girls that they've recovered were sexually abused as children.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And
so one of the things that I'm learning as I continue to do research is that if you don't help a child recover from that victimization, it continues and continues and continues. And they don't see that they're worth anything more. And so that's really what we want to do is kind of work with that. But that doesn't mean that someone who's never been abused would later be trafficked or be victimized or assaulted in some way.
Angela, you were a victim of sexual violence, and you have turned your pain into purpose.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of your accomplishments and what you've done. Can you talk us through your original ordeal and what happened?
Sure, absolutely. Let me start by saying, Dana, that every person who's watching your show personally knows a survivor of sexual violence. Now, mine was a stranger assault. Most of the time, it's somebody that we know and we trust. But I was kidnapped in broad daylight from Woodfield Shopping Mall. Wow. I was a teenager. I found out later he had been stalking me. And it was an experience where when you're 17, you don't think things like that can happen. And all of a sudden, there was a knife at my throat and he threw me in his car. But what really helped kind of transform me from victim to survivor was having the family support that so many people don't have. Right. But even when I went down to the police station that night, the detective didn't believe me. There was nothing done on my case. There's a lot of re-traumatization that happens. And so I'm very passionate about also educating police stations, first responders on what to say or do if somebody discloses. Because research shows the first person, as you know, that's the first person that a survivor tells. If that person reacts well, that's greatly going to impact the person's healing process.
It's true. And oftentimes people don't react well.
Absolutely. And well-meaning loved ones, well-meaning parents, family members. Now, me as a new mom, I understand that it's so difficult to go through those things.
Yeah. What I think is so remarkable about you, and I obviously read up on your story, is that you remembered the details and you were able to recount them to the police, to the detectives for the investigation. And I remember you saying that if you lived, that you would make sure that this man was not able to hurt anybody else.
That's right.
And through your strength, through your tenacity, through your dedication, tell us what the sentence was.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, the sentence was life in prison. We found out that he had been on parole for murdering a 15-year-old girl named Julie Angel. Angel was her last name. Faith is a huge part of my life, and I felt like she helped me through that experience. Even though he had taped my eyes shut, like you said, I could see down to either side, so I consciously remembered everything I could. And so I really believe that she helped me through that experience.
You're so strong. And you channeled that into starting P.A.V.E. Can you tell us about P.A.V.E. and why you started or how you started it? And tell us about our shirts.
Absolutely.
We're not just going to Six Flags.
That's right.
Tell us about it.
So when I went away to college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I looked for a group like P.A.V.E. to join, and there wasn't one. So I researched for months. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes or reinvent the wheel. And what I found was missing, Dana, was something that was a prevention-based program that took a positive approach, engaging both men and women to be a part of the solution in a positive way. So we talk about consent and healthy relationships, bystander intervention. We do a lot of education and training, but then we also need to support survivors. And the gap that we found was missing is that holistic way of healing, trauma-informed yoga, meditation, dance therapy, art therapy, thinking outside the box. And also we have a social advocacy campaign for P.A.V.E. So like these shirts, for example, the What She Was Wearing campaign. It's rooted in a spoken word piece that we use in high schools and colleges across the country. But it says, this t-shirt is not asking for it, because all too often people are blamed for what they're wearing. Even in court, they asked me what I was wearing. I was wearing a pantsuit, but if I was wearing a red miniskirt, should that make a difference? Absolutely not.
No.
But unfortunately, even to this day, with the Me Too movement and Time's Up, and we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go because survivors are still blamed and shamed for that experiencing happened to them, and that needs to change.
And I think that that blaming is so real. The victim blaming is real. You mentioned bystander intervention. And I think, Michelle, you also encourage people to speak up and to get involved and to say something. Can you talk a little bit about that and how important it is?
I think it's so important I work with a lot of girls, so I'm probably going to err on saying that, but for people to find their voice, whether it's for themselves or for other people. And when we work with our girls, a lot of what we do is how you can be a bystander and stand up for somebody who's next to you. There's so many studies where they have just people watch something happen and will not stand up, will not say anything. They'll just let it go. And that's not right. It's not human. We should not be like that. We should be erring on the side of getting involved, but you need to know how to do that and do it well. And so whether you're a preteen or teen or whether you're an adult, teaching people how to do that and know what to say, who to go to, how to intervene in the moment is, I think, incredibly empowering for all of us. But women have been taught to be quiet. We've been taught to sit there and take it, and we can't do that anymore.
It's so important because I think silence supports the oppressor.
Absolutely.
And we were talking before about how silence is what people use to suppress people from saying anything, for standing up for themselves, for fighting back. And I just think it's so important to break the silence. You talk about shattering the silence.
Yes. That's our website, is Shattering the Silence. And so for us, we want people to really, from a healing perspective, write about it. Whatever you can, talk about it, write about it, create art around it, because if you keep these feelings and experiences inside, and speaking out publicly is certainly not for everybody, but when you keep it inside, we see a lot of alcohol abuse and eating disorders and self-mutilation. We see a lot of emotional aftermaths that really can be mitigated with processing it, and us as a community creating that safe space to support survivors and celebrate their voices.
How do you help people find their voice?
Well, for me personally, we have a lot of workshops that do that. So we have regional empowerment summits where we encourage people to find their voice through artistic means, but also giving people the strength and the tools to talk to their parents. And even, reporting isn't for everybody. As we know, sexual assault is the most underreported crime in the country, but doing, more training so officers and detectives know how to respond in a trauma-informed way, in a sensitive way, so we can see the report rates come up and we can, find ways to get young men and women and all ages, because this impacts everybody, but to talk about it.
We actually practice. So in our programs, it's after school, it's with the girls, and we do a lot of They don't know that they're doing this, but we do games, we do different things in which they have to use their voice and say something, or have to say, this is what I hear from a coach or from parents, or these are what everybody wants me to be like, but this is what I want. And they get to say that out loud. And it's interesting because as you were talking, I just realized I became aware of some things that had happened to me when I was in college, and I was a creative writing major, and I wrote stories. And that's how it came out for the first time, was just writing the stories. Wow. And thinking I had told nobody, not my family, not my sister, like my parents, my sister, nobody. And it had come out in creative writing. And that, so we give the girls chances to do that too, and write stories. That
expression.
Yes, it's just expression. Songs, poems, yes.
I think that therapy, or what's therapeutic, is transparency and just being able to talk, being able to express, whether it's written, whether you're speaking it. There is therapy in transparency. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it took a long time because I'm Italian. So for us, it's, you don't go to therapy, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps. But for a long time, I suffered in silence. Even though I was active, I was in the community, I was able to change laws when I was 17, working with the family of the girl that he had killed. But yet I was suffering myself in silence because I had to put this strong face on, until I found an amazing trauma therapist that helped me with something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's an amazing trauma therapy that really helped give me that freedom back in my life, because it is paralyzing at times. Your heart beats when, you think that things are, a threat to you when they're not. And so it's exhausting to feel like that all the time. So I really encourage people to find a therapist. And if one doesn't work for you, don't be afraid to try a few others. That trust that a person has with their therapist is what's going to help really get them to the next level.
I think that that's so important.
One of the things that happens when you've been abused or attacked and things like that is that you tend to trust the people that you shouldn't, and don't trust the people that you should. That was something that was explained to me a long time ago.
You trust the people that you
shouldn't, and you don't trust the people that you should. And part of that is because of people's responses when you do tell it. And so it inverts everything that would be healthy for you. So you don't tell people who could actually be helpful, but you tell people who, you find, it's that cliche, you find men to date or some things that are opposite of who you should trust. And that's been powerful to realize that when I see that in girls, understanding, oh, there's a deeper thing going on. And when I find myself doing that and being like, oh, nope, this is a tape from a long time ago. I don't need to listen to that anymore.
Well, that's incredible. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by the Right Center for Women's Health, providing personalized luxury health care.
Welcome back to Dana Being Dana. I am talking to good friends of mine, Angela and Michelle, who both have organizations, P.A.V.E. and the Fusion Project, respectively, that support victims, women, children, in being stronger, surviving, and not only surviving, but thriving. The statistics on sex assault and sex trafficking are startling. Can you tell us some of those?
Well, during our little break, we were talking, and I think statistics are not super, they're not the same, and it goes all over. But it can be anywhere from 1 out of 4 to 3 out of 4 girls by the time they're 18 have been somehow assaulted or abused or trafficked, all of that. But trafficking, and you and I have talked about this a lot, trafficking statistics are startling because we think it happens over there. We think about people getting taken. We think about all those things. But it happens in every single zip code. There's not one zip code in the United States that is free of trafficking. And every year there's over 300,000 girls that are trafficked. So that's appalling. If you put that in statistics for sexual abuse, it's even worse. And I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I should remember it being millions of children who are, and young adults who are abused. And assaulted.
Are men victims as well?
Absolutely.
Yes, they are. And that's even a lesser reported, so it's very hard to get the numbers. When I worked at the Rape Crisis Center, the most horrible calls, it brings tears to my eyes to think about it, were from men.
Yeah.
And part of it, which is horrible, is that we are used to women talking about it and girls talking about it, but for a boy to feel, or a man to feel victimized and to know that their body part in some way failed them. It didn't fail them, it was doing what it was supposed to do. But it can be so traumatic for men and boys that it's even more underreported. And their way of getting through it is different, don't you think?
Absolutely. One of our P.A.V.E. ambassadors is Flip Rodriguez, who's on American Ninja Warrior. And he was a male survivor. He was abused from the ages of like 9 to 14 by his father. And so he felt a lot of shame, and he wore this mask on the show until one day he took off the mask and in front of millions of people said, you know what, that is not my shame. And millions of people responded saying, thank you for your voice, because this is a TV show that people, would watch with their families. And it gave this great foundation for people to talk to their kids, boys and girls, about sexual violence and those kinds of things, and empowerment. I love how you use the word thriver, right? I always say it's a journey from victim to survivor to thriver.
Yes. It's so true. Yeah. I want to talk about grooming.
I was just going to say that fits perfectly with what we're talking about.
Absolutely, because grooming is the setup, and it doesn't happen immediately.
Yes.
These things don't always come quickly.
Right.
A lot of times people are targeted, and it's a buildup over time.
Yes.
And people don't realize that it's whittling away at self-esteem or comfort or understanding of a person.
Creating trust.
Creating trust.
Not just with the potential victim, but with the whole family.
Creating dependency.
Yes.
Making somebody dependent on them or, giving gifts or spoiling.
And it blurs the line. So then you're unaware when something happens that it was even bad.
Yeah. How can this person who's done all of these things to me, for me, so nice to me, hurt me? Yeah, hurt me.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's the tearing down. They build you up, and then they tear you down emotionally, and then sometimes physically to reel you in. So you spend time kind of like in quicksand, trying to please.
Yes.
And then you end up doing things or making decisions that you may not otherwise because your self-esteem has been compromised.
Yeah. And most of the time, these are repeat offenders. You look at Larry Nassar, who was the doctor for all the gymnasts.
Exactly.
You look at Bill Cosby. I mean, there's so many examples of these men who are, and I know women also can be perpetrators, but overwhelmingly they are men, and they find ways to just build that trust. And I mean, sometimes there could be dozens and dozens and dozens of survivors, but because it's somebody that person knows, it's very underreported. Yeah. People don't want to even tell their families about it because it's so embarrassing and confusing.
And they think it's their fault.
Yes.
They think that they brought it on.
Yes.
And, part of grooming is that sense of oftentimes, and it's horrible, but in families or situations, more often than not, the perpetrator is somebody that we know, which you said already. And so they will be in situations where they might be holding a small child in a group of their family, touching the child, and no one's doing anything. The child's looking around and seeing that no one's responding. And so therefore, this must not be wrong. And so at a very young age, it teaches the child not to trust their own instincts and to trust the other person to tell you whether it's wrong or right. And so you magnify that through years and different behaviors. I mean, all the things that have happened in the Catholic Church, all those things they hope that people will be quiet, because if you say something out loud, it could get clarified. So what do? You teach the person to be quiet. This is just between us. This is a special thing that we do. There's a million different things that they say that can cause that quietness.
You've talked about church, doctors, family members, all of these people that people trust, victims trust. And what is so frustrating for me is that people don't understand how the pain that they inflict on others in that brief moment, right?
Yes.
A touching, an assault, very relatively short periods of time, right?
Right.
Instances of abuse. But those last a lifetime. The scars that are inflicted last a lifetime. How do you encourage people that you work with to overcome that pain?
Well, one of the young women that we worked very closely with, Delaney Henderson, was assaulted by 2 boys in her high school. Not only did this experience happen to her, she was bullied so badly by her high school classmates after this happened that she tried to take her own life twice.
Yeah. Right.
And so, for her, she just felt so alone. And I think it really is so important for people to understand as parents how to talk to their kids about this. And language is important, even for kids. Going back to grooming for a moment, you don't use the word good touch, bad touch. It could feel good. That's confusing.
Right.
Safe versus unsafe touch. Safe versus unsafe secrets. So there's ways that you can talk to kids starting as little as a year old in an age-appropriate way about these things, and that's critically important.
We talk about tricky adults. Adults don't ask children for help, so when they're getting asked by a stranger for help, that's something to look forward to.
You're tricking you,
Tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, as you build up the person, it can take a very long time, but teaching them to trust themselves. I remember someone asking me, as part of my own healing, was trust yourself, and what do you think?
Yes.
Over and over and over again, because that's gotten all skewed and they don't know.
And hope. I think hope is such an important word. It's important for people to understand that a happy, joyful life is absolutely possible after trauma. And a lot of people sometimes feel broken or damaged, but letting them know that they are whole and that there is hope for a brighter tomorrow.
When you talked about Delaney and her story, and I'm familiar with it, she talked a lot about being alone and feeling alone.
Exactly.
And there are so many Delaneys out there who are alone. That's why I think it's so important for people to support people. I talk a lot about women supporting women because I don't think we do that enough. But I think it also includes men. I think speaking up, being supportive, being there for each other. Can you talk about why you think that's important and how you've seen that when people do show up for each other and support each other, great things can happen? I know you specifically showed up and supported Delaney, and it made a huge difference and impact for her.
And then she reaches out and does the same. So with our high school program, we have her on film. And I think it's so important for high school students to hear from a real high school survivor. And so, we really teach and train students what to do if somebody discloses, because we aren't trained. Parents aren't trained. Students aren't trained. We're not trained on what to say or do if somebody discloses. And so that's a really important part of the educational curriculum. And it just can make such a difference.
One of the things we say is if someone tells you their story, you believe it.
That's right.
No matter what they say, believe it. Because I know there are a small percentage of people who are trying to get money or something like that. And so they will make up a story or magnify a story or something. But that is so minuscule to the thousands and thousands and millions of people that are living it. So we teach the girls from the very beginning, if someone says something, you believe it. It's their story, and you do not ask. None of the questions can be, well, how, or are you sure, or anything like that. But it's also really important, even if something hasn't happened, for them to feel like they've got people who believe them. We've got girls in our program that we found out later. I found out from parents this last year that we had girls in the program who were suicidal. I didn't know, but they felt alone. They felt like things had happened. They didn't know anybody to tell. And just being in a community without ever talking about things that had happened to them, just being in the community gave them a sense of not being alone. And so after a while, they were able to disclose some things. They were able to say, oh, I'm not alone. And some of them have made their best friends in a group where they came in knowing nobody.
I love
That's
that.
so important. Yeah.
Oftentimes people just want to feel like they belong.
They do.
They want to
That's
feel
one of our
like
basic needs.
It's as humans.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think the work that you ladies do is so incredible, and I'm honored to have you all as my friends. Can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite parts of your job?
Well, I love when I'm speaking in an audience and I have a line of people who just want to share their story and just get a hug. Because I always ask, can I hug you? And that's an important part of consent.
Right.
And so that's just my favorite part, is just seeing that hope in somebody's eyes, the secret that they had carried for so long, realizing that shame doesn't have to be theirs. And just that moment can completely transform their path. And that's one of my, most beautiful moments.
We are a little bit different because we go week after week after week and we're with the same girls. And one of the things I love is watching them grow and having them come in. She knows, but one of my favorite girls who's come through our program would not talk to us for a long time. And she would just come in and then leave and never say any words. And after months, she came in and started talking, would high-five me and do some things like that. And later to find out all the things that were happening in her life. And all we did was accept her. We didn't force her to talk. We didn't force her to do anything that she didn't want to do. But just watching a girl change she's a leader now. And I know that she's going to do some great things because she's found her voice. Yes. She's begun to believe in herself. And I love that. I love watching anybody find their voice and believe in themselves and realize that their life is just beginning. They can have a hope and a new life anytime.
So much happens when you're able to connect that.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like, this is the gap. You know, there's all of this potential laying right here.
Yes.
You know, but something has happened.
Yes.
Someone feels alone. They don't feel like they have a connection.
Yeah.
And you guys can bridge that gap. You guys can bridge that gap. What do you want to say to people who are watching, who haven't found you yet? What advice do you have for them to get to that next step, to get to that next level?
Well, our website is shatteringthesilence.org, and we have a lot of tools for parents as well as friends, as well as if somebody wants to take their pain and turn it into something positive. Because for me, that was one of my, I think for me, speaking out and getting active to make sure that I could try and avoid this happening to other people really helped me go that path from victim to survivor to thriver. I wanted to make sure that I could turn that pain into something positive. So giving people very tangible grassroots ways that they can make a difference in their community.
Yeah.
And I would just love to be in every junior high across the country. And our website is fusion4girls.org. And I don't say that for any reason except for I do believe every junior high girl and every boy, we hope to do a boys program too, they deserve to be talked to and just embraced for who they are, no matter who they are, that they need to feel that love and connection. Because I want to stop people from needing you, quite frankly. I want to create an environment where we don't need to have so much recovery, and because we have taught people not to treat people that way from the beginning.
You know, one of the things you said early on is that self-esteem is at its highest for girls right before the puberty phase. And if not addressed, it becomes that lowest point. And you have people who are grown, who still suffer from low self-esteem if not addressed. And I think
it's not their fault. Puberty creates low self-esteem. It's just part of the whole process that you go from high to low. And then if you don't deal with it, it goes into your 30s and 40s. And so that's if we can deal with that when they're in junior high, what a difference their life will be like.
What a huge difference. And I love the difference that you all are making in so many lives. You're such a blessing to others. You help others thrive, and you're thriving yourselves. And I just appreciate you. And so I'm just so happy that you've joined me for this episode, because I think talking about this stuff is so incredibly important. When women shine their light in the same direction, it is a beautiful brilliance. Here at Dana Being Dana, we hope to be part of the movement of women finding their voice and using their power to support one another in meaningful and tangible ways. Hopefully you have been entertained, if not encouraged or inspired. I do not promise to be an expert, nor do I have all the answers. I'm just Dana being Dana. See you next time.